Let's get right into it. Number 5, the flying phallus protector. Picture this. You're living in ancient Rome, minding your own business, when suddenly your neighbor shows up wearing what looks like a winged private part around their neck. Before you start judging, they'd tell you it's actually their most prized possession. Meet Facinus, Rome's official flying phallus god. This wasn't some underground cult or secret society. The Roman government literally endorsed worshiping a winged dong that could supposedly fly around blessing people. Facinus was covered in more phalluses than you could count. His body was one giant phallus, which had smaller phalluses sprouting from it, plus a phallus for a tail and phallus legs. It's like someone took the concept of masculinity and cranked it up to 11, then gave it wings for good measure. Romans wore these phallic charms as jewelry, hung them in their homes, and even carved them into their wind chimes. When Roman generals celebrated military victories, the Vestal virgins would hang a Facinus charm under their chariots to protect them from jealousy and evil eyes. The most ridiculous part? Artistic depictions showed this flying phallus literally ejaculating to fight off evil spirits. Romans genuinely believed that supernatural sperm could ward off supernatural threats. Parents gave these charms to their children for protection, especially boys. Imagine explaining to your kid that their lucky charm is a flying private part that shoots protective fluids at demons. The worship of Facinus wasn't considered weird or inappropriate back then. It was essential spiritual protection, like carrying a cross or a rabbit's foot today. Romans were so convinced of its power that they made it part of state religion. If you're enjoying these bizarre historical facts, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started with humanity's strangest beliefs. Number 4, the 3 deaths sacrifice. The ancient Celts had a death ritual so extreme it makes horror movies look tame. They called it the threefold death, and it was exactly what it sounds like. Celtic druids believed that killing someone 3 different ways in rapid succession would please 3 different gods simultaneously. Talk about efficiency. The victim would be strangled, beaten over the head, and have their throat slashed, all within minutes. Then they'd throw the body into a sacred bog. This wasn't random violence. These were carefully orchestrated religious ceremonies with willing participants. Archaeological evidence shows these victims were often high-ranking members of society who volunteered for this brutal honor. The most famous example is Lindo Man, a bog body discovered in England. Scientists analyzed his perfectly preserved remains and found evidence of all 3 killing methods. His stomach contents revealed he'd eaten a special ceremonial cake before his death, suggesting he knew what was coming and participated willingly. The Celts were obsessed with the number 3. They had 3 main gods who preferred different sacrifice methods: burning, drowning, and hanging. By combining 3 death methods, they figured they could cover all their divine bases with one sacrifice. It was like spiritual insurance with a horrifying premium. The victims weren't just killed and forgotten. The bog preservation turned them into sacred relics that lasted for centuries. These weren't acts of cruelty, but expressions of the deepest religious devotion. People literally died 3 times over to ensure their community's spiritual protection. Comment your location and let me know what bizarre rituals your country practiced historically. Number 3, the mummy diet plan. Buddhist monks in ancient Japan had the most extreme weight loss program in human history. They called it self-mummification, and it took dedication that makes modern fitness challenges look like child's play. For 3 years, monks would eat nothing but nuts, seeds, and bark. This stripped away all their body fat and most of their muscle mass. They were essentially starving themselves to death on purpose. But that was just phase 1. During the next 3 years, they'd eat only roots and pine needles while drinking tea made from the toxic sap of urushi trees. This poison tea would kill off bacteria and parasites in their bodies, making them less likely to decay after death. Finally, they'd lock themselves in underground chambers barely big enough to sit in. They'd meditate until they died, ringing a bell each day to signal they were still alive. When the bell stopped ringing, they were dead. After 3 more years underground, other monks would dig up the body. If it was perfectly preserved, they'd declare it a successful self-mummification and put it on display. If the body had decayed, they'd rebury it and call it a noble failure. These monks weren't trying to commit suicide. They believed this extreme process would transform them into living Buddhas who could protect their communities forever. They spent nearly a decade slowly dying in the most agonizing way possible, all for spiritual enlightenment. The practice was so brutal that very few monks actually succeeded. Most just died horribly without achieving mummification. Eventually, the Japanese government banned self-mummification because it was too extreme even for medieval standards. Number 2, the cannibalistic goodbye feast. Ancient cultures in Papua New Guinea and Brazil had a funeral tradition that would make modern mourning rituals seem incredibly tame. When someone died, their family didn't just grieve and bury the body. Instead, they threw what they called a feast of the dead, where the main course was literally the deceased person. This wasn't about hunger or desperation. These communities had plenty of other food sources. Eating their dead relatives was their way of showing ultimate love and respect. They believed that by consuming the flesh of their loved ones, they were keeping them alive within their own bodies forever. The Wari people of Brazil would carefully prepare the deceased, cooking different body parts in specific ways. Family members would take turns eating portions while sharing memories and stories. It was like a combination dinner party and memorial service, except the guest of honor was also the meal. They thought leaving a body to rot in the ground was disrespectful and wasteful. Why let worms and bacteria consume your beloved grandmother when her own family could honor her properly? The deceased Essie supposedly expected this final gesture of goodwill from their tribe and direct family members. These weren't savage acts, but expressions of deep cultural love. The living would bond with the dead through this ultimate act of intimacy. Imagine explaining to someone today that the best way to honor your deceased parent is to literally eat them at a family gathering. These communities saw it as the most natural thing in the world. They genuinely believed that allowing natural decomposition was cruel and that consumption was compassionate. Share this video with someone who thinks modern traditions are weird, because humanity's past makes today's customs look absolutely normal by comparison. Number 1, medieval bloodletting madness. For over 1,000 years, doctors across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East had a cure for absolutely everything. Headache? We'll drain some blood. Broken leg? More bloodletting. Feeling sad? Obviously you have too much blood. Plague symptoms? Time to open those veins. Medieval physicians were convinced that all illness came from having too much blood in your body. They developed an entire medical system around deliberately making people bleed. They used knives, leeches, and special tools designed specifically for cutting open human veins. Patients would sit there while doctors drained pints of blood, weakening them further when they needed strength to fight off illness. The sicker you were, the more blood they'd take. People dying of infections would have even more blood removed, which obviously made them worse, but doctors saw this as proof that they needed to drain even more blood. It was a deadly cycle of medical ignorance. Barbers weren't just cutting hair back then. Those red and white striped barber poles, the red represents blood and the white represents bandages. Your local hairstylist was also your surgeon and bloodletting specialist. Kings and peasants alike submitted to this bizarre treatment. Wealthy people could afford gold-plated bloodletting tools, while poor folks made do with rusty knives. Everyone genuinely believed that intentionally making yourself bleed was the height of medical sophistication. The practice was so popular that some people got bloodletting done regularly as preventive medicine, like getting annual checkups today. They'd schedule appointments to have their blood drained just to stay healthy. It took centuries before anyone questioned whether deliberately weakening sick people might actually be counterproductive. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.